Glowing red eyes, an unmasculine voice, he reads too fast and likes old comic book stories, he edits poorly, he mashes.
This comic has a rather ominous introduction. The writer asks us, can an age-old specter, an awful apparition from beyond the grave itself, create terror as it walks the earth? It sounded impossible until Gail Leslie and Tony Brand crossed the trail of the living ghost. Here's a tense, hair-raising story of a cruel spirit once defeated, whose lust for vengeance would not be stilled. Hello and welcome to this episode of Murder Incorporated. In this issue, we proudly bring you a timeless classic in horror comics called Out of the Unknown. This is episode number 8. This is the very issue that we pulled our last episode's story from. These come to us from the pages of Adventures into the Unknown, issue 2, published in November of 1948. It was published by the American Comics Group. It is a classic and rare. This is an independent production. Please like, comment, subscribe, share, donate, and visit our merchandise store. Every little bit helps. Yes, this is our second story of The Living Ghost at Murder Incorporated. The first was in our 6th episode, whereas this is the 8th. The Living Ghost was an immortal creature, born at the dawn of time, whom was cursed to walk the earth forever, due to once being Satan's right-hand man. The Living Ghost had just started one of his occasional killing sprees, and also took a liking to Ms. Gail Leslie, kidnapping her as consort and sex slave. Gail was a reporter for the Daily Bugle, and was blonde and fit and enjoyed freaky lingerie. Tony Brand, her friend, boyfriend, and police detective, tracked she and her captor down, and the two of them captured the Living Ghost. They'd even believed they'd successfully used an ancient relic to turn him mortal, but when placed in the electric chair for execution, the mortality was found to be only temporary, and the Living Ghost escaped, promising revenge. Now it appears he is back, and having lost a lot of weight, and cured his terrible case of pink eye. Will he ever be reformed? Has he even brushed his teeth to cure his fetid and crispy breath? We now will find out. We start. In a summer hotel in a peaceful countryside, Gail is in a slinky red bikini and Tony Brand is watching her dive from the poolside. Watch this one, Tony. Tony considers. I brought Gail up here to relax so she could forget about the Living Ghost. Looks like it's working. And that evening, as they stood watching the sunset after dinner, she still seemed nervous and fidgety. Gail told him, "That smoke rising from the mountain, Tony. I wonder what it is." Tony said, "Forget it. Just look at that moon. Things have been so lovely and quiet up here that it's hard to remember you know who. I think we're done with him and his ghostly kind for good." The smoking mountain nearby is, unbeknownst to Gail, Tony, and the world, the current hangout of the Living Ghost. There he stands, his green color and long black coat with his arms outstretched, boasting. "Too long have I waited. This night revenge shall be mine." And later, when Gail was alone that night, he snatches her. "I've waited for this moment," he laughs. "Oh no, help me," she screams. In answer to Gail's screams, Tony Brand appeared. "The Living Ghost," he yelled. "Let her go." Tony punched the evil green specter. "So you again," the Living Ghost exclaims and throws Tony aside. "You've crossed me for the last time," the monster laughed. Several people happened upon Tony Brand's body within moments. A bellboy said, "Looks like there was a fight in Ms. Leslie's room, sir, and she's gone." An observer noted, and this man thrown here as if by someone with superhuman strength. We'd better call the sheriff." And in the morning, Tony was recovered, but there was still no sign of Gail Leslie. A search had been conducted. Dogs were called in. Probably not miniature schnauzers, for miniature schnauzers have never known true failure, whatever their exploit. The sheriff told Tony, "I don't like the goings-on around here. First, that smoke from Bald Mountain. Now a woman has been kidnapped." Tony asked, "What do you mean, Sheriff? I saw that smoke too, but it was probably just a forest fire." The sheriff shook his head. "Forest fire? Nothing. It's that old volcano acting up, depend on it. Why, when the smoke got stronger, it seemed the smell of brimstone." Tony was startled. "What? Excuse me if I have to leave, but I think you've given me a lead." Tony Brand had eventually found himself toward the top of Lonely Bald Mountain, telling himself, "I didn't dare bring help. That might have put the ghost on guard. Those fleeing animals prove I'm on the right track. Nothing human could scare them that much." And then he happens upon a ghost. Tony whispered, "This is it. A zombie guard. I can't get past him. For Gail's sake, I'd better get help from someone who knows the supernatural." At the Institute for Psychic Research, down at the strip mall next to the Wendy's, Tony was next in the office of his friend, the famous paranormal researcher Dr. Big Carrot Van Dyke. Basically, Big Carrot was telling him, "I knew you'd be back, Tony. Once a man incurs the enmity of the living ghost, not even death can save him." Tony replied, "I had to come, Dr. Van Dyke. That monster's got Gail." Big Carrot told him, "Then be glad you're still alive and resign yourself, because you'll never see her again. Depend on it." Tony's head was in his hands. He said, "No, doctor. Don't say that." Tony Brand told Dr. Van Dyke, "I'll never give up hoping that." Tony saw a painting on the wall. "What's that?" he asked Van Dyke. Van Dyke said, "It's a reconstructed picture of the Dark Phantom, one of the most powerful and deadly ghosts in history. He's as strong as the living ghost himself, and is his mortal enemy." Tony exclaimed, "I've got it. If only I could contact him. I'd trade on his hatred for the living ghost and enlist him as an ally." Big Carrot then advised Tony, "It means meddling with supernatural forces and deadly danger. But if I don't help you, you'll tangle with the living ghost personally, and that's sure death. Maybe if I send you to Professor Slinky Mavelli, the greatest medium in the world." Tony agreed. "Please. There's no time to lose." Carrot said, "Then listen. Little is known of the Dark Phantom. He's only a legend, but the legend also tells that someday he's doomed to destruction at the hands of a mortal whom confronts him with the ancient symbol of destiny." Big Carrot Van Dyke then takes a tablet from a shelf and hands it to Tony. "This," Van Dyke said. Tony replied, "I'll take it, but I can't see any use for it. If the Phantom helps me rescue Gail, I won't need it. And if he doesn't, I don't want to live either." And Van Dyke then arranged a meeting with Professor Mavelli, world's greatest medium. Mavelli asserted, "The Dark Phantom, if I put you in touch with him, you'll be in his power. Do you realize it'll mean your death?" Tony nodded. "I'm ready to take that risk. If you can contact him for me, go ahead." And within the hour, the seance began. A glowing crystal ball, incense due to a fat woman using the bathroom down the hall, the lights turned low, cocktails with little umbrellas in them. Slinky Mavelli was chanting, draw near, O emissaries of the Dark Phantom. A mortal stands ready to deliver himself unto you. Approach and convey him to your dread master, Mavelli demanded. Holy smoke, Tony Brand said, as weird lights, demonic faces, and strange mumblings started to interplay across and beyond Slinky's crystal ball. I can't resist them. I wonder what happens next, Tony thought to himself, as the faces manifested in physical creatures, standing all around them. The spirits that Mavelli had summoned, these factotums of the Dark Phantom, grabbed Tony and up through a swirling mist. As the speed of light, they were transported with Tony Brand, until they were next in the high mountains of far-off Tibet. "Well, I'm here," Tony observed. He felt dizzy and tired, drained and numb. "When do I get to meet the head ghoul?" A voice sneered from behind him. "You won't have long to wait." "Not often do mortals dare my hospitality, O fool, and for any rash enough, it is death." The Dark Phantom looked like a movie werewolf, ears outstretched to either side, wispy hair that stood high on his scalp, stooped shoulders, a raspy beard, clawed hands, and massive fangs. The creature pounced on Tony, taking him by the throat. Tony said, "Wait, I'll trade for my life. Spare me, and I'll lead you to your most hated enemy, the living ghost." The Dark Phantom let Tony go, asking, "The ghost, eh? I've waited for this moment for centuries, but if you're lying..." "You can find that out easily enough," Tony said. "What are we waiting for?" The Dark Phantom grabbed Tony and they began to fly into the night. And when they arrived at Lonely Bald Mountain, Tony pointed. "That zombie guard. Careful, he'll give the alarm." "Watch," the Dark Phantom said. And then laughed as he pounced on the zombie with a tigerish leap, grabbing it up and tossing it over the cliff edge. The Dark Phantom said, "There! If only the living ghost will be as easy." Tony said, "We'd best separate and start looking for him." And meanwhile, Gale is tied up in a darkened chamber, hearing footsteps approaching. Gale pleads to the living ghost, "Please let me go, please." "I swore revenge when first you crossed my path," he said. "I'll have it now, inflicted by creatures from out of the unknown." He turned and commanded, "My creatures, to me!" More monsters approached. She looked up at the ceiling into nothingness, screaming, "Help! Help!" "Who can help you here?" The living ghost mocked her. And in sheer coincidence, Tony then crashed through the door. "Hold it," Tony commanded. "Tony!" Gale exclaimed. The living ghost demanded, "So once again, you dare to cross me?" The living ghost motioned his minion away. "Back, you two. I'll take care of this human fool myself." "Run, Tony!" Gale screamed. "Let him come, Gale. I'm not scared." Remembering how Tony had defeated him in the last story, the living ghost asked, "You seem sure of yourself, almost as if you had some powerful weapon at your command." "He has, and it is here," the Dark Phantom announced as he entered the room too. "Turn and face me, living ghost. Look upon your enemy," the Dark Phantom demanded, baring his huge fangs and grinning proudly. The living ghost was aghast. "You, the Dark Phantom! You've found me at last, but I'm glad of it. Ages have passed, but at last we meet, the two greatest powers of the spirit world." "And now to destroy you," the living ghost said. "Think so?" the Dark Phantom asked. "I didn't seek you out to wage a losing battle." The two specters clashed in a mighty duel. They jumped at each other with superhuman strength, claws, and fangs. "It is horrible," Gale says, "but if only he can beat the living ghost." Tony tells her, "It's a battle of giants, and they look pretty evenly matched to me." The two evil monsters are now rolling across the floor, strangling one another. Up on their feet, the two begin to box once more. Strike after strike, a fist and claw. The living ghost throws flaming firewood from the fireplace at the Dark Phantom. "Curse you! I'll get you yet," he says. The Dark Phantom reaches up to pull a rafter out of the ceiling, and with a fearful power, strikes the living ghost across the chest with it. The living ghost is thrown across the room, putting a big dent in the brick wall. Tony and Gale are overjoyed with the defeat of their old nemesis. Tony said, "It worked, Gale." Gale said, "I've never been so happy before." The Dark Phantom boasts, "At last the living ghost is in my power. Now to make him my captive for all time. That mountain peak, mortals, watch." The monster is pointing out a window. The Dark Phantom raises his arms in weird incantation. "By moldering skull and ancient tomb, help me seal this specter's doom. O spirits of the great unknown, chain the living ghost in stone." And now we see the image of the living ghost carved hugely into the side of a massive mountain in the distance. For the living ghost has become a statue, imprisoned in rock. Gale is hugging Tony once more. She says, "It's so wonderful, not having that monster to fear any longer. Now I can start living again." The Dark Phantom interjects, "You little fool, you think I'll let you live? My bargain was to save this man only, but you must be destroyed." The Dark Phantom picks her up over his head as if to throw her. "Die, mortal!" "Help, Tony, help," Gale pleads. Tony says, "Nothing I can do against that awful power." And Tony takes the talisman that Dr. Van Dyke had given him from his pocket. "Something you might want to see," Tony sneered, as he grabbed the Dark Phantom's throat with one hand and held the ancient symbol to his neck, like a knife, with the other. The legend tells that someday, the Dark Phantom is doomed to destruction at the hands of a mortal who confronts him with the ancient symbol of destiny. Remember? And the Dark Phantom screams and lets go of Gale. And the Dark Phantom seems to be obliterated before their eyes with a loud crash. Gale has fallen. Tony stoops to one knee to comfort her. Tony says, "He's vanished, Gale, for good, and you'll never have to worry about the living ghost again either." "Thank heavens," she says. But as the Dark Phantom vanishes into the limbo of lost souls, his power also disappears. And from the nearby peak, the living ghost is released. "Free, free," the living ghost screams in jubilation. "And now revenge on the mortals who foiled me." Gale is saying, "Funny, Tony, but with everything to be happy for, why should I have this strange feeling of fear?" "Forget it, Gale," he tells her. "You haven't a worry in the world." The end. And yes, we noted the claims of yet another story of Gale, Tony, and the living ghost. And we'll try to get to it soon.